So today we'll talk about Fiori architecture and why exactly we are preferring frameworks, and a quick comparison of where exactly UFI, because we need to understand the scope of Fiori. If is it going to sustain for long, or how where exactly SAP is positioning SAP Fiori as a stack within SAP ecosystem. So, and what's the latest in Fiori 3.0? So, Fiori 3.0 is something we have called web components. This is completely new approach where when new approaches SAP is trying to, bring into picture. So, we'll talk about these areas in general today. So, so this is the simplest form in if you're taking any SAP S4 HANA product or ERP product. So ERP business suite when generally we call old product, and the latest one is S4 HANA. So definitely one important thing to understand for architecture is whenever your customer is in old like if he's not using S4 HANA, he's using SAP ERP product, etc. When I say this, S4 HANA has all built-in Fiori plugins, etc. available. So straight away you can consume all the Fiori apps. But if he is in ERP, we need to ensure that he is in NetWeaver 7.3 and above. So if he's in above NetWeaver stack and 7.3 and above, then specifically all the plugins will be available. Else we have to have a manually, getting the from the service marketplace, installing the add-ons, etc. From the basis we need to get those things done. So this is one important thing to understand. So Fiori works by default in S4 HANA. But whereas if you are in old stack on ERP suite, etc., say beyond S4 HANA, then you have to make sure that you have the right components. So what was this component, etc., we'll dig deep later, but just a simple understanding of it. And coming to oral architecture, how exactly it looks like, be it any backend product. So it could be, you are using SAP product, it could be HR module, it could be CRM module. So all these are, they call it as business suite. In S4 HANA, they simplified and, they made it, all modules you can straight away, use it. So it has minimalistic functionalities as well, dedicated, HR specific, etc. as well. So be it water backend. So how exactly we consume is, this is how the current landscape is. Most of the traditional backend currently, the SAP S4 HANA system, were being accessed using uh, transaction based. So T codes. So when you use T codes, nothing but they are either web info screens or classic GUI screens. So this is how typically 80 to 90% of the use cases in SAP ERP works. And in S4 HANA, you have some use cases which will run on Fiori as well. So this is where the Fiori fits in. If you see this half of the transactions, when you see either they go with classic GUI for HTML. The difference between these two is web info screens are, how the we are using the SAP T codes, everything, right? So that is nothing but built in web info technology. And the same screens when they are accessible on browser, so they call it as GUI for HTML. So basically both are based on transaction based itself. So either you're accessing through browser or you're accessing through a dedicated GUI standalone client as such. So both represent the same stack of technology. All these are desktop based, basically. So you cannot actually use them on mobile as a form factor. So that was the reason we have discussed earlier as well. So if you see the OData service, whatever we are building it, so it is they call it as a gateway. So SAP gateway is nothing but all the data beyond this layer on the backend system will be exposed via a channel called OData channel. So via this channel, what happens is, out there could be a number of tables. See, there are like a number of transactions. There could be thousands of tables, and all the tables are not directly exposed to protect the data part and everything. If you access via OData channel, you're limiting the user to what are the application needs, only that part we are trying to expose it. Now if you have an application called my timesheet, you are only exposing the tables related to that my timesheet related application, and only those are accessible, that too in terms of bits of and chunks of data. Like if you have whole records, out of it only a few records will be accessible as per your access. So suppose you are a manager, you'll have out of the my timesheet there are two tables. Then within the two tables, whatever subsequent data is required for your role, only those will be visible to you. So that's how OData channel limits the access to the complete data. Getting right? So this is where the OData service plays a role in between this. And all our applications are run at the browser layer. So in the within the browser, we use Fiori Launchpad, the tiles which we saw, right? So the tiles which we are seeing it, all these this we call it as Fiori Launchpad, and each of these tiles are accessed from browser, correct? So in the browser we are running this Launchpad, and within the Launchpad we have all our apps. So this is how the Fiori Launchpad comes into picture. And other way around is we have something called Fiori Client. So Fiori Client mobile application we have it, and there also either on the Android or iOS if you're running it, it uses for all the native scenarios. It can consume from MDK. So there is a separate library called mobile, library. So development kit. So mobile development kit, if they use it, so all those services are enabled via some other intermediate channel to just leverage for the specific platforms. So this is how the applications are run. So this is we are very much familiar. So all the yellow one we are talking about technology. So to build these apps, there are like two approaches. Using UFI framework is one approach, and within the framework you have something called Fiori elements. Fiori elements is low code approach, where well, I know if you need not to code anything. So standard template, whatever is provided, the same template you can deliver. So within a day or two, if you have to develop, so the approach we follow is Fiori elements. It's all
So
based on
the
annotations.
reason why they say that end users can also, kind of become like configurers. I mean,
Yes,
they kind of sell it, so make it look like anybody can do it.
correct. So they are trying to simplify, like we said, the challenge, right? So Fiori adoption or anything, if it has to increase exponentially, so you have lakhs of transactions. If you have to bring all the SAP existing developers, ABAPers, Pete ABAPers, or be it OpenStack developers outside the SAP community. So whichever
Mm.
developer, if he has to leverage, SAP has to provide the right tools, right? So in that aspect itself, they introduce something called Fiori elements. So what Fiori elements does is, if you all you have to do is, if the OData service has something, the metadata has, which fields are, what's the data type, what is the, field length, etc. If you know, automatically using that metadata, the UI will be auto generated. So we
Right.
have seen few templates, right? We saw at least report, object page, etc. There are like certain templates. So all these templates, there are two approaches, either freestyle or free Fiori elements. When I say Fiori element as a selection, it will give you only this output. You cannot tweak or modify any of the elements in it. You can probably change the label name, etc., but not you cannot add any new fields, etc. Currently, maybe in the future releases, SAP might give some more muzzle to Fiori elements approach. But currently, Fiori elements approach, what it allows you is, if you have an OData service and if you have a business application studio or any IDE, so all you need to do is you have to select the template, select the OData service. Within few clicks, your application will be ready. So in a 1 hour or within a day, if you have to build any use case or scenario, if you follow this particular layouts and you have your OData service ready, then building the application will be delivered in within a day or two. So this we call it as low code approach, where you will not have any code or minimalistic coding, and you can achieve relatively simple use cases. So suppose you have an approval scenario, and all they are interested in is approving the some, suppose you have a products or orders, and business has asked you that, uh, see, can we have a very quick application where to process purchase orders, anything, etc. All you need to do is you have to select flexible layout template, and here it will list you all the orders, and you can select the order and you can just click on approve, reject, etc. using flexible layout. So it gives you quick application in a day or two. So applications can build in a day or two. It can be built in few weeks and few months as well. So based on the complexity, we try to break them into separate tiles. So if you have too much of a complexity you're dealing with, when it doesn't make sense, right? Uh, See, you may not be the only person who is working in your organization, right? So if I define as a task, so suppose updating a profile, so that you can split it as a my profile as a single tile, and managing the salary component or anything, paychecks, etc. I can break it into a separate tile. So each of the problem statement will be breaked up in Fiori into separate tiles, and they'll be provided as a collection of apps. So each tile generally we call it as an app. Getting right?
Yeah.
So by this way, see, users intend a task when they have to do, they can straight away go to it. So you might ask a question. So again, it will become too many tiles, right? So to overcome that, we have something called cross app navigation. What cross app navigation does is, suppose you are in list report now, and you wanted to access some approving the timesheet, etc., which uses flexibility. So we can just give a nice button here. So, or you can give this hyperlink. On clicking this hyperlink, we can redirect this automatically, this information, and pass on to this application. So user will not notice that he's moving to one application to other application. It will be just from one page to other page, he's just moving on to it. So you're
Mm.
getting right. So though you have multiple tiles, it gives you flexibility. If user really requires it, you can integrate in a single user flow, or if you want to keep it separate, we can see keep it separate. So they are make point to point solutions. When I say point to point, to solve a purpose, they build one application, and all these applications are delivered as tiles, and based on the scenario we can stitch them together or we can decouple them. So that's how Fiori apps serve the purpose of multiple people. So if you're not interested in pay stuff, you will be just sticking to your profile stuff, updating the profile. You need not to unnecessarily look into all the information. So currently the T codes approach, what happens is all the information is provided in the same T code, and you are being bombarded with all the information. Ideally you generally not require, so you might have come for specific task and you are not interested in looking at other activities, etc. So we are reducing the number of you know unnecessary data being shown to the end user. So this is how traditionally the Fiori elements or UFI comes into picture. So this is a high level way. If you dig deep, so when you go inside, there's this particular half layer, so this particular layer inside. Now typically how the server part will be handled. So we call all these components, we if you see this is how what happens in the browser, and there's a middle layer called dispatcher, and then you have it will be bifurcated into two servers. This they call it as Fiori front end server and back end server. When we say back end server, it's nothing but your S4 HANA system. Okay. And when you say front end server, it's also an SAP system, but it has all the Fiori apps or all the Fiori related stuff, everything placed in a single system. So here you need to understand. So the applications and everything currently what we are using is HTML5 plus JavaScript. See, obviously UFA framework is also JavaScript based. So underlying language what we are using is this. And the approach is how we do is either Fiori elements or freestyle SAP UFA freestyle application, using which we will build these applications. So the browser, deals with this area, and web dispatcher is meant for single sign-on you have, right? So web dispatcher will reroute whether you have authorization or not. If not, it will straight away will not provide any access to this underlying SAP systems. So this is a layer which protects you.
So single sign-on is a an actual needed necessity for the setting this up, right? I mean, there's no way we can bypass and not
Correct.
have single sign-on. Okay.
Yes. So this web dispatcher is SAP's own product. So you can have other any third-party products. So clients usually use their own product, but the inbuilt SAP web dispatcher also does the same task. It's its main purpose is to load balance as well. If the inflow of traffic is too huge,
Mm.
so it can balance the load accordingly as well. So that we
Let's
call it
say,
as load balance.
like a lot of customers are using, these Amazon Web Services or Azure, right?
Correct.
Mostly like Amazon Web Services, but so within the cloud itself, there is a dispatcher, right?
Correct.
So I sometimes wonder which one takes precedence, right? Because when we say, oh, this is faster, quicker, it may not necessarily be coming from the web dispatcher, right? It could also be because this whole thing is on a cloud too, right?
Correct. So here I'll just show you even that as well now. So the clear difference is, see, see your data may not be residing at the same place, and there will be many layers. So all you are seeing end user sees is browser. So he's accessing the browser, but he doesn't know what's happening beyond the browser, right?
Mm.
So see, first and foremost, we are authenticating it. If you have seen our example, so I'll just take. So this is how the user sees. Uh, Now within the authentication itself, there are like many other ways. See what they call it as SAP identity provider. So if you're using it, so default they'll just come here and they'll log in, and here it will automatically picks up our SAP ID information and it passes on to system. So if you see here, you do not see any what you have accessed, what is the underlying behind
Mhm.
the scenes happening, etc.
Right.
Okay. So all these layers are they are structured in such a way that you have from the end user point of view, he doesn't have any inconvenience, etc. So for this itself, there is a huge see, I'll show you how we do in cloud platform, etc. as well. um, to simply show you in a quick snapshot. So all our web browser, whatever we are accessing, right? So they further go through the process of identity provider, any identity provider. So identity provider are just redirecting. See, they'll just your have your IDs, right? So your ID in this case, suppose you have an ID called 1234, right? So this it will just carry your only this ID. So a very chunk of data. It will not carry maybe ID and password. Okay. So it will carry very lightweight chunk of data. So it is very so lightweight that all you need is to understand, identity provider needs these particular tokens. So these tokens are passed to identity provider. Okay, identity provider, within identity provider there are like lots of SAML based checks. We have they're like various other each identity provider will use different approaches. Okay, so the way it is verified, so these tokens are authenticated or not, so you can manipulate them in between as well, right? So to avoid it, they have encryptions, they have other areas how this is processed, this data is further processed using public key, etc. But to keep it very simple, these identity providers will access when you click a submit or login button. They pass this to identity provider. This identity provider could be hosted on your Azure, it could be hosted on your AWS. These all are just services. Okay, this they call it as these are all platform as a service, PaaS solutions. So the one which you are talking or platform as service. So Azure and as well as AWS, all these are PaaS solutions. We have SAP's own is SAP BTP. Now they call it as SAP Business Technology Platform. Previously it used to be called as SAP Cloud Platform. So even SAP's own one is BTP. Even we have SAP Identity Provider also, like
Hmm.
the web dispatcher what I'm talking about. Web dispatcher is not exactly a identity provider. So it has it is available built in the server, SAP server. So when I say SAP, you are having S4 HANA, you have a default web dispatcher. If you want to use it, you can use it. If you do not want to use and you want to use identity provider, you can use it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
Okay, so these are like services. When I say services, SML service is being provided by Azure. So if you subscribe to this Azure service, all it does is it has a function. So here they have many services. So the type of services are also like the charges, how they charge is um, they like time based charge also. See how much time the code is taking to execute, accordingly also there are charges. Like if you in this case SML service, if you are providing it, we have a piece of code. So to authenticate, maybe we are suppose using 3 lines of code. So how much time execution it is taking? Suppose it is taking some 1 second or 3 seconds, 0.3 seconds it's taking. So cloud services, why people are going for cloud, So this is one of the way. There are like lots of selling point is there. So in cloud, if you have to use this particular identity provider, probably traditional approaches, you antivirus anything if you have, probably you will be buying 3 year license, 1 year license. You use it, then you dispose it off, right? That's how you might be using. Okay. So the problem with this approach is, again after 1 year, you might go to some other provider, correct? So the same way, identity provider also, today you might be using one service, tomorrow you might go to some other provider, right? Cloud offers what the flexibility offer is. If 3 lines of execution takes 0.3 seconds, how much our time it is, irrespective of license. If this code is executed, you have to pay, suppose, $1. So you're paying $1 whenever it is authenticating. So if it doesn't in a year, nobody is using the service, you need not to pay anything. No need to pay. You're getting right. So pay per use. So these all are like pay per use services. So if you are using it, you have to pay, because these kind of services, if you provide this way, based on volume, Azure gets a benefit. And if there are least users, so by adopting cloud, small scale business can afford these services because they don't have huge volume. They need not to pay upfront cost. You're understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the reason why they go for different service providers is, so if they are completely, most of the companies they either use Microsoft based technology. If they are using it, they'll try to use Azure Active Directory, etc. So Active Directory is
Right.
something.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
about to get that Active Directory part because it always kind of interfered with the, the users kind of complain that they're unable to
Correct.
log in because if they change the password, their Windows password or something,
Mhm.
AD is like a big headache.
Correct. So Active Directory is its main purpose was, it's like a proxy. See who is who, if you they'll the device as well. See which device you are using. So if you change the device, etc. Also it will be able to understand. So you are trying to ensure that the wrong person is not accessing, right? So it
Mm.
uses a SML approach itself. So Active Directory
Yeah,
basically
kind of
what it
like
does is, yes,
yeah.
yes,
A kind of like headache, right? Let's say if we are testing something and we have a test user that we need to
yeah.
use to log in, and then they have scripts written to sort of capture, and then it sends out messages. Are you trying to log in from your terminal using a different ID, right? These are some of the new headaches that at least I found in terms of this
To
single sign-on thing.
Yeah, actually things are improving now because see, password is really a problem. No matter 10 years back or 20 years back, still it's a problem. So they try to bring lots of innovations like fingerprint scanner. They are using face recognition,
Yeah.
unlock, and single sign-on is one such attempt. And OTP based, and you see a Facebook login, Google login. So they are trying to bring lots of multiple ways to simplify that problem. Okay,
Mm,
ultimately what we are trying to do is to avoid the entering user ID and password. See, to
yeah.
solve this simple problem, we are trying to add layers. The problem with business is, see, compromising the data of business data. If your one ID got compromised, so hackers can exploit the whole data.
Exactly. Yep.
So they are worried about that part. So they had to introduce these particular layers. Why they are actually introducing these layers is they are not able to solve this password problem, ID and password problem. We are using traditional old approach. See, ID and password are very old ways of accessing applications. Still people rely on the sole way of logging into any applications. We don't
Yeah.
need actually ID and password. There should be a better way, but that problem, see, it's like plain old simple way. It is working, right? So nobody has any problem, so people are using it. See, you go, you create lots of passwords. You remember that's end user problem. We're not going to bother about it. We have to secure our applications. We have to secure our business. So you're getting the problem, right? See, nobody is actually looking at the problem in a different way.
Right.
Now you're ending up with so many passwords, so you do not remember. They came up with identity provider. See, all it's doing is, it's remembering. First time when you entered, it is trying to remember it, and it's trying to, or either you provide an email ID. So what it doesn't, so the corresponding email ID, it will store the user ID password, and in some other one of the other information you're trying to provide, and it's trying to match those details and trying to see whether you are the right person or not. Okay. So maybe it has some timeout functions. Say up to 3 days or up to 90 days, do not prompt him to change the password, etc. What does
Mm,
it is? So the identity provider inbuilt, what we are trying to say is provide access to this particular email ID or anything till 90 days. That when the timeout says 90 days, so again it will prompt you, please change your password. So these are like built-in mechanisms to deal with, to prevent misuse of underlying data. So these are like different mechanisms I'm trying to say. So uh, anybody can follow different approaches, and that's how we have. So if you once you have this identifier, what it does is all it accesses only your these particular tokens. So further, if this is authenticated, then the piece of code will instruct, it will redirect to remote server. So remote server in this case it would be our S4 HANA backend or any system for that matter. So it just takes input. If it meets its criteria, it passes on to this. So there is nowhere it is residing in your area or in your SAP server anywhere. If you see, this is completely somewhere in the cloud. Okay, this is your on premise. When I say on premise, it is in your client premises. Okay, and this browser is at your place. So end user whoever is using, he's using from his own device, okay, user device from his browser. So this channel, see, it is like public internet, you're accessing it. So there should be somewhere, remotely you have to access. So these services, all they need is this token. If this token is passed to this particular identity provider, it authenticates, then it gets back to your desired destination. So in our case, our destination is our S4 HANA system. So here again, this server itself again has web dispatcher, etc. Okay, all these channels are multiple channels. So straight away you can, what I'm saying is, you can straight away use direct route. See, you log in to directly to the SAP server. That's how SAP GUI you open, right? So when you open, you enter your user ID password. So you're directly accessing on the system straight away.
Mm.
Okay. So there, you are directly, you're having physical access to the server. Sometimes you do not have. So when you are accessing from browser, you are from at some other, random device outside of your office premises, etc., where you are not having physical access. Then the identity providers, etc., will make your life easy by securing the server. If boss he's having the right access, we can allow
Mm.
him to access our systems. So that's doing a basic check. So it is on the plug and play kind of thing. So if you do not want, you can remove it any day. And these are like optional ways to deal with. Yeah. So you just trying to understand other parts. Let me come back to our. So fine. So you'll understand. So you will see directly each of the layers and etc. So in detail, so you'll understand where exactly what is going on. So now we understood that anything it's outside of the traffic it is coming. So this is a public internet, free internet. You can access Fiori apps, you can access any other non-SAP apps, etc., or consumer apps, anything. So beat any channel to authenticate securely that yes, this is a trusted device. We can actually provide access to our business data. So this layer will ensure that there is a huge traffic as well. To balance the load, etc., also web dispatcher will comes into picture. So this will route all the traffic to respective systems. There could be, see, SAP system will not be just one system. Okay, for a big customers, there could be each say you are having HR system. So if you're having 4 lakh employees, this HR S4 HANA system itself could be some 10-20 systems. Okay. All your data will be available across multiple places, but based on the region, you might have to maintain, global system and local system. So India specific, if I might have some one India specific data at one location, and I could have, US specific data at a different location. So we can have multiple SAP servers as well for same module as well. Okay. So that's a way of organizing, etc. We are not going to into that, but you should route the data to the right SAP server, right? So all those activities are being done by web dispatcher. So to basically to understand, web dispatcher allows you to monitor whether you have monitors whether you have the access, or if you, in order to balance the load as well, it deals with as a load balancer as well. And coming in deep into the layer of front end server, so this is where we call it as embedded hub or a central hub. So what exactly these jargons, and what exactly these components? So you see UI components, UI data, gateway services, etc. So I'll just try to go deep inside this. So just take a simple. So if you're familiar with existing architecture, fine. If not, we'll just quickly go through this. So if you see, all we have an SAP system. So now S4 HANA, if you're having a system in your client premises, okay, and both are S4 HANA systems. We are using a three-tier approach kind of. So one S4 HANA system dedicatedly we are using as a Fiori front-end server. Okay, they call it as FES. S4 HANA inbuilt, which contains your business data. So we call it as a backend server. So what we are trying to say is, so this is, they call it in short form as BES. So see, both are S4 HANA systems. There is no difference at all. Okay. The add-ons components which you install. So suppose now if I install HR components, it becomes my HR system. if I install a CRM add-on, it becomes my CRM system. SAP has only one approach, and this particular SAP server, the so-called SAP sandbox, SAP server, uh, if in order to access maintain and Fiori apps, etc., in order to secure more, so if you are using all the Fiori apps directly on this particular system, the problem is your apps and data both are residing in the same SAP server, and the chances of, if I could crack the layer of this Fiori apps, so if I could access bypass the apps, etc., you're compromise the whole data, right? So if I can host all the Fiori apps in the same system, that we call it as, if you are hosting all the Fiori apps in the same system, then we call that as embedded hub. When I say embedded hub, all your Fiori apps and your business data lies in one single system. But on the contrary, if you are trying to have all your Fiori apps available on a separate system where you have an S4HANA system, where you only Fiori apps you're hosting it. So Fiori apps as well as your OData services, that we call it as gateway services, then we call this as you know central hub approach. So you have to look at it this way. So if you have a single SAP box, you do not have this. Okay. So if you're having just front end server, then it's the same SAP box if you're using for business data as well as for your Fiori apps, hosting Fiori apps, then we call it as an embedded hub. If you have two systems where you have dedicatedly all the Fiori apps hosted in one system and all your business data lies in other system, then we call it a central hub. So the reason behind this is, see, to ensure that more secure. See, only Fiori apps are, though apps are compromised, your business data cannot be compromised at all. The reason being is the same SAP ID. If you have, remember, you might have your landscape system where you might have, they might have some different systems. So all your SAP systems, three-letter word they use, HFD system, GPD system, HID, etc. So if you're having some system like HIG, etc., HID, etc., where they might call, if you have an SAP ID, so this might be your, front-end system where using which you are accessing to your Fiori apps. Okay, and you might have a backend system, your HR system, HR, HR DI, say if not, and these are all dialog users and your backend system. So traditionally, you might have seen on your projects anywhere where you have two IDs and you would have access to two systems where you're logging to this system. Maybe it could be client 100 or 200, etc. And here you might have, access to some 200 client, etc. Where basically from this system, both IDs, if you are extended to both the system, then only you'll be able to access the Fiori apps. Either if you do not have backend access, you may not be able to see the data. You might be able to see only the Fiori apps. Okay, and you may not be able to see the data. It's because your data is a separate system. Your apps are in a separate system. So if you, whenever you see a Fiori apps, uh, apps are loading but there is no data, that means you are actually in central hub approach where your data is running in different system, and either your ID is not extended to that system, or either you're not having access to that particular backend system. You're able to relate, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, whenever you see in your customer landscape different systems, they are basically in central hub approach. When I say central hub approach, so when huge organizations always they keep their business data in a separate SAP box, and all your apps wherever you're playing around will be placed in a separate box. Reason being is to make it more secure. So if you have access to this particular access, if this particular apps are compromised, still it's useless to the end user because the data doesn't exist in this particular system. He cannot even touch any single data. See, if all he has to access, all he can access is the using gateway channel, only the limited table data. So if you have two tables are being used in the particular application, how many other apps it got compromised, you'll be able to see only those chunks of data, and you'll not have complete data access to the backend. So that way, this central hub approach actually protects the data from unwanted access, etc. You're getting right. So
Yeah.
this is where the role of central hub really plays. And not only that, see, there are other reasons as well. See, if you're implementing or adopting lots of Fiori apps, etc., and you are using multiple channels, it is always a good practice. See, you may not have just HR module. See, if you might have SAP CRM module. So for each module, if you have apps in separate systems, again, maintain the Fiori apps, etc. It's also a headache. So you have to install on this particular system, on CRM system also. You have to, suppose you are assume now today we are having in separate box for uh, so you have, suppose, two modules your customer is having. One, he's having HR module on that and CRM module on this, and there could be some PLM module in some other system. So they're like different SAP boxes data. You're so CRM data you're wanted to keep, customer data, etc. And HR data you're putting in a different box. So now when you wanted to access, if you wanted to access CRM related apps, general practices, you'll install CRM apps, Fiori apps on this system, right? And HR related apps you'll install on this system, Fiori apps on this system. The problem is dual maintenance. So you have to maintain on this system, you have to maintain on this system. If you hang 1,000 systems, you are gone. Okay. So to make it life there easy, tomorrow if they are purchasing different license, they are having 1,000 systems, so they are scaling up all your apps. When they have to access, they'll just access one system, single system. So if you have any app, be it any module of app, all my fear apps, if they are in one box, so tomorrow if you want to connect it, you can just connect this particular system to this particular gateway. So we have something called RFC. So using remote function calls, etc., we can connect to any system. So in this case, we is gateway services, we using system alias, we can connect to any system. So today, Fiori apps today you want to use from CRM data, and suppose you have acquired some other organization, you got some new data, you can simply add one more connection to that particular system, and both the data you can combine and you can create a view, CDS view, etc. And both the data we can directly consume in our Fiori application. All you need is connect this particular new system to this particular Fiori box. So this way, increasing and scaling of your systems will be decoupled. Getting right?
Yeah.
So these are the advantage of having separate box and separate system for Fiori apps. So this is about Fiori, front end server. So now if you have a separate system, now we understood why we are having separate system for Fiori server, Fiori front end server. Now the same SAP box, if see it has all the things required. If you put this add on, it just that Fiori server can be converted into CRM system any day, anytime. Okay. So because you have the required license, so if you are using it in the same system, simple system, if so suppose there's a small scale customer, he doesn't want to have this much of use, investment, etc. If he is very much good and he's not very much interested in using all SAP products, see, he's very much interested in very few apps, then he need not invest a separate box and invest lots of money into it. He can simply go for embedded hub, where the same system, if you install this particular add-ons, you're pretty much good with that. See, for him, it's security, etc., are of not very high priority. Maybe it's a priority, definitely, but he has limited use cases. See, he uses hardly a couple of Fiori apps or custom implementations. For that, you need not to invest a whole new SAP box, right? So it doesn't make sense in that case. So where are the situation demands? So they can go for simple scenarios. They can go for embedded hub, where you do not practically do not have large implementations, etc. Then you can go with embedded hub. If you're having a central hub, that means you are having a dedicated Fiori space where you are going to build some new solutions on top of it. Then it's always a good practice to have separate uh, Fiori service. Fine. Um, See, just this one, I'll talk about this in detail. I mean, what are you seeing inside right? Fiori Launchpad apps, elements, etc. roles. This I'll just show you in the real SAP system meanwhile, but just let me complete this part. So each stack, what tools we are using. So today we'll try to get, see, in order to build these Fiori elements, we need access to Business Application Studio. So previously we used to use SAP Web IDE, and the next version of everybody is Business Application Studio. So now SAP, from last 2 months, officially it has 6 months back it has been doing its rounds, but now they have finally WebID they stopped and they said going forward we are going to stick to Business Application Studio. It is Microsoft with partnership with Microsoft. This is based on Visual Studio Code. So that's the reason we download Visual Studio Code. So we are able to do it. That is for your local scenarios. But in your business case, they might be providing you with BAS. They call in short as BAS. When it's a BAS, Business Application Studio. So using Business Application Studio, you will be doing all your developments going forward. And there are new technologies as well coming in this space. See, OData services traditional way of building is using SCGW transaction. So SCGW is a transaction using which we'll do. I think you are familiar with it. So if you're not, so that's the way how the underlying tables etc. will be consumed, and we generate this particular service. So our service, when it looks this way,
The gateways, right?
correct, gateways. So we are able to consume this particular service, OData service, right? So this is how our OData service looks, and so all these services, whatever we are seeing. So if you see, these all are different entity sets. So entity sets, we call it as entity sets in OData service. You can relate them as a specific table in your backend data. So it could be product set is your product table, sales order could be your sales table, etc. So these are like you have different entity sets. So all these OData services are generated using SCJW transaction. So that is a traditional way of you know mm, building OData. So if you use SAP Business Application Studio for building your UFI apps, and use SCW to build your OData services in simple terms. Okay, so these are the two things primarily, most traditionally this is how we use. Okay, for regular use cases. So this is these two. If you are having access to these particular two things, then you are good to build a UFI app and everything. So you have an OData service. If you're an app, you will generally have access to SCJW T code. In the GUI, you have to log in and you have to use this T code to build. You can construct your OData services. And if you are, trying to build a UFI app, all you need is access to Business App Studio, and then you can start, building the applications. So this is in short about what tools and technologies. So today we'll try to get access to those systems as well, and we'll try to see. So in this layer, this so OData service, etc. This is how we are doing. Now recently, from now SAP has introduced two more areas. So one is RAP, RESTful Application Programming, and Cloud Application Programming. So these are like the cloud adoption as it is good, and traction is going towards that direction. So they are bringing in new technologies and new tools. So I'm not sure how long they are going to sustain, but now new. See, if you wanted to build completely on the cloud, and for ABAP, RESTful application programming is one newly introduced. And for generically any, for if you wanted to build native HANA apps or etc., or any cloud apps, etc., cloud application programming is one. So these two are meant for building OData services on the cloud. So on-premise SCW is on-premise way, and using these ways you can build on your OData service, everything you can create on the cloud. So previously we used to have Access OData. Access OData was for if you're having HANA, underlying HANA database and HANA system, etc., then access data also uh, was a way to generate OData service. See how we expose this backend data. So there are like different technologies and tools being made available, like how we have UFI framework for building UFI apps. So similarly, the channel of consuming the underlying data. So they are trying to create multiple platforms. So these two are something, three approaches. One is using RESTful application program. You can create your OData services, and using cloud application programming way also we can create OData services, etc. And using CDS views also we can use. All the Fiori elements applications use CDS views. So CDS views generate something called annotations. So we consume internally the annotations for Fiori element based applications. So now RAP and CAP models are very pretty much very new in the space, and you have some open SAP courses running on these two topics, but these are pretty much very new areas. Okay, they have been there around, but now they are gaining some popularity in SAP space. Okay, so now we just understood that what are the new areas coming in this space, etc. And so here, when I say this is even this business
And this,
opportunity is on cloud itself. Yes, yes.
I am a bit confused about the difference, between the
Mhm,
core data services
mhm.
and the O data services.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay.
So when you here saying it, okay, um, I'll tell you. So just to give a brief, so if you're having SAP OData service, to build OData service is nothing but exposing in terms of XML, right? So there are like many other ways of generating that particular data into that form. If you're using ABAP, pure ABAP as a programming language to generate, then SCGW is the one which gives the tool set to deliver. See, you select the underlying tables. All what we are doing is we are selecting which table to read the data, and it has to be transformed into XML form, correct? So what are this OData service? This is in XML structure. If you see here, so this is nothing but all these are like when you see these all are XML based. These tags, custom tags, whenever whatever you see, all are XML based. So these kind of way, if you want to transform, if you're using ABAP programming language, then using SCGW is the way. If you generate that, we call it as, see, all are OData services. It's a protocol. See, end product is your data is accessed in this particular format. Then that we call it as OData service. Okay. So OData service is a way of if you see the data in this form, that means your data is exposed via OData services. These are this we call it as RESTful applications as well. Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm coining too many words, but I'm trying
Mhm.
to say I'll try to simplify. So I'll see now if I break down this for UFI apps, when I'm saying Fiori apps, okay, let me not complicate it. So Fiori apps, when you're saying, what is the underlying technology to it? SAP UFI framework, right?
Mm.
So we are using SAP UFI framework, and we are building all the Fiori apps. So you call custom UFI apps, whatever. So this internally it uses HTML5, CSS. It's based on those technologies, JavaScript on the background. So but as a bundle, all this using this, they have built up on some controls, etc. It became a base. Similarly for OData service space, previously we used to have there is very limited scope. Like limited scope is OData is a service channel, so it will have OData channel, mm, allows instead of regular SQL queries, you'll use OData queries. OData queries are very lightweight and decent way of holding the data. So what our application requires, only those data will hold it. So all the each app was having one OData service. So generally we had one OData service, so for one app in general. In general, so it's not a hard rule that you should not have multiple services, but in general, each app will have one OData. What technically we're saying is what the data should contain in this particular service is based on ABAP programming. So in ABAP, you program to say what kind of tables should be exposed via OData service. If you are using ABAP as a programming language, then we use SCW, and such a way of generating one is, the traditional way of doing OData services. Clear? So this way, this is one way you can generate your OData services using SCW. And now new ways SAP has introduced. Why? Okay. Okay. There are not only ABAP based developers, there are like lots of other developers. So any developer should be able to generate, see how we are able to, we are giving Fiori elements based application. So they should be able to generate, lots of other people also should be able to generate in different ways. Ultimately, what we are doing is ABAP is not a restriction here. So because underlying system, if you are running on an on-premise system, you have all the programs etc written in ABAP programming. So this interface, this particular plugin, SCW is a plugin which add on which will allow you to design OData service using ABAP programming. Other than programming ABAP programming, if you want to use any other ways, so we can use straight away Node.js as well. Within the Node.js, if you are using it, okay, using Node.js, so pure JavaScript, using pure JavaScript and everything, if you wanted to build, so you can build as well. Okay. So if you're using these particular approaches that is introduced in cloud application programming, then also we can generate OData service. You're able to relate now. So if you're using ABAP language, etc., that is one way. These services we call generally as access OData, etc. So they have different terminology, but the data, the way it is rendered, will always looks this way. And there is now the CDS views, the core data service or the CDS views are nothing but they are specific to HANA product. So if you're hanging HANA database, so you could have Oracle database, you could have any other database. Okay, this ABAP works in case of your traditional Oracle database as well. Okay, if you're in Oracle database, etc., you have this particular thing, then you can use pretty much. See, your SAP systems, ERP systems could run on any database, etc. But as for HANA now, by default, it comes with HANA database. So if
Mm.
you're using HANA database, etc., they have something called calculation views, etc. Okay, analytical views. So if you are using directly the views, so they using CDS views. CDS views is in a way where you can expose, it's like bottom up approach, so all your views can be automatically converted into OData service.
Mm.
You're getting it right? So suppose
Yeah.
I have 10 tables, all the 10 tables I have combined them and made into single view. Okay, one view. Okay, so here advantage is like, um, you're using HANA capabilities to simplify your database way of accessing. Suppose you have customer information, you have supplier information, and both are in two different tables. Now you combine into a single view, and you say customer information as a view. So that can be directly automatically converted into an OData service and can be utilized for consumption. So if such a way, if you're doing it, then we call it as core data services. These are like multiple channels using which we can generate OData services. That's what we're trying to say. So these are so CDS views has been popular quite from some years. Now these new areas, apart from CDS views, new areas are CAP and RESTful application programming. RAP and CAP are in the cloud space general. So this is where the new areas also the SAP is introducing to generate OData. So these are like different ways how you can generate OData services. Clear or still any doubt?
No, I think I'm clear now. Thank you.
Okay. So what we are trying to say is SAP introduces different ways to ease our development. So you can generate. There is no hard and fast rule. Only this way we can generate OData services. OData services is a common, Uh, so like how we have see, for building UI applications, we use HTML as a language. We use UFA as a language. We can use Angular as a language. We can use multiple approaches, right? Similarly, for generating OData service, that's not the only way. There are multiple channels by which we can generate this particular OData services. So that's the whole crux of this idea. So SAP is trying with different ways. I'm not sure which is going to last longer, but
Mm.
SAW is bread and butter. As long as ABAP is there, you can use this particular SAW approach. Okay.
Mm.
So that's the clear understanding. But in order to simplify it, there are like new ways of generating. For a low code approach using CDS views, it makes possible because all your single view contains all the required fields required for your application. So you're able to generate the code as well. So that new possibility arises with CDS views. So Fiori elements, elements approach, low code approach came to the front end only because of CDS views. CDS views allows you to have all your fields etc. in single view. So in the single view you have all the fields, right? So if you have all the fields, that's what is required for the building a UFA application. So you have all the fields, all the properties, all the data types. So what else you need to build an application? So they automated it. So you just provide me the service and all the names we'll use it to generate the code. So automatically code is getting generated.
Mm.
So that's how this particular smart, they used to call it smart templates. Now they're calling it as Fiori elements. So the so-called auto code generation, etc. capabilities came out of this particular CDS use itself. Okay. So this is about architecture. Think there are a few more things. So okay, I think tomorrow we'll cover. I think it will be too much. So architecture we understand. No, let's have a quick. So you can get access to these tools. I'll just show you. If you are already having some of the tools, it is fine. So one of the, I think we already have Visual Studio Code, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
apart from that, for OData service ESY system, you need to have access and Business App Studio. So if you're not having access to Business App Studio, you can go to this particular URL. Just share the details as well. So, and for OData service to get ESY system access, so if you're already having, you can use that credentials. If not, you can have, register for ESY system. So we have,
That's pretty slow though, you know. Like I logged into that SAP S5,
okay.
um, and I'm trying to type in SCGW and it's like going kind of hanging for quite some time now.
No, because it will be used by many people, and SAP, it's they have given just one simple system, so it solves most of the purpose. I know it is slow, but
Like I was just trying to like just playing around with it, trying to create a project. I can't even put like a cursor on that project.
I get it. Okay. So if for the detailed steps, etc., these are like they'll walk you through. So these two I'll just share. So those are links to sign up. So if you want detailed steps, how to get access, etc., you can follow these steps as well. So first and foremost, you need an SAP account. So if you're not having an SAP account, you can use the same ID to across. So so then we can use this particular business substitute access. So I'll just walk you through in tomorrow. So how to get access, etc. But you can just follow these instructions as well. So to get it. So once you have business substitute and OData ESY system access, we'll have lots of other services. Okay. I'll show you, what all additional things you can do using ESY system. And we'll do one simple application, Fiori Elements application in Business Studio to check all the setup, etc., are properly done. So what we have to do is we have to link this particular business student ESY system together. Then so these are the parameters which you have to maintain in your cloud foundry system. So once you maintain it, these two will be linked. All we will tomorrow will try to do is we'll try to link these two systems and we'll see live all the architecture, etc. Meanwhile, if you already have ESY system, what you can do is I'll just show you that as well. So if you're having access to ESY system, okay, you can use this particular URL to access all the Launchpad Fiori apps. The same ESY credentials you can use. Okay, so you can have access to this Launchpad, and you can have if you're using this. Okay, so I think you are already using this. So this is a GUI URL where you can play around, check the landscape. So if you see ES5 is the embedded hub, so you have both. See, your Fiori apps are running there, and as well we are having the service as well. If you see, this is ES5. If you see the uh, preceding one, if you see here ES5. So in our case, this is an embedded hub where your Fiori apps as well as your OData service are hosted on the same system. Correct. So this is what the architecture which we have learned. So because it's publicly exposed, SAP need not to have a separate SAP Fiori and etc. So all are available on the same system. So they have provided it. So you can check those things in the system. So once you log in here, you can go to menu and then go to system here, and then you have something called status. So if you go to status, so if you see this is ESV system, so you'll see all the product information. This is your user ID, etc. If you see here closely, if you see the database system, underlying database system is Sybase here. Okay, Sybase is SAP acquired product, so it's they are using for all these low cases, etc. But in your customer case, always you'll have HANA database if you are on S4 HANA product, and if you are on whether in on Oracle DB, etc. Here, if it shows as Oracle DB, then you will come to know that. So that why what exactly difference is, like I had just mentioned once, analytical, there are like three types of app categories in Fiori apps. One is transactional, another is fact sheet, and the third is analytical apps. So SAP has positioned such a way that on Oracle DB only you can access transactional apps and fact sheet apps. You cannot access analytical apps, stating that unless you use HANA database, we are not providing access to any of your Fiori analytical apps. See what they coin is HANA is in-memory database, and it requires lots of RAM, and then being that it will process the data in real time, and Oracle does not have such capabilities. So they have positioned that you have to use HANA database. So as for HANA, customer doesn't think at all. He doesn't know what his database, because it is bundled all together. So if you are using S4 HANA product, that means you'll always have HANA database. Okay, there is no question of Oracle DB. But you are on SAP ERP. If your customer is on ERP, there are chances that he is most likely on Oracle database. Getting the point?
Mm.
Okay, so how do you know which system it is, and how do you know that Fiori apps the customer doesn't cannot use analytical apps? You have to come to this status and you have to check your database. So if you check the database as Sybase in this case, pretty much you cannot use any analytical apps. You can only use transactional apps.
Mm.
Clear? So this is how we can check. And further, what see now, like I said, SAP, any SAP box can be converted into HR system, can be converted into CRM system. How do you know that which box it is and what add-ons are there? So here, when you check on this particular part, here you have the installed product versions. So if you come here, if you see here, so it will tell you this is the NetWeaver ABAP stack. So SAP server has something called NetWeaver as a technology stack. Like how you have a laptop it could have either Mac operating system or a Windows operating system. So that is the stack on top of which you are running your Java applications, you're running your installing lots of other apps, etc. Right? So similarly for SAP box, NetWeaver is a technology stack. It could be either ABAP or either a Java. NetWeaver as ABAP or Java means that is the uh, you can consider as for the server it is as an operating system. Okay, on top of which other add-ons will be installed. So NetWeaver is your stack. On that currently you have Fiori front-end server. So they have installed FES, the so-called concept which we talked, right? So FES for S4 HANA 2020 edition has been installed on this SCP box. Clear? So this has all the Fiori components. Further to it, they are like this is like product. Here, if you find HR product, if HR apps are available or not, if your HR product is installed, you'll see HR product as well. CRM is installed, CRM you'll see. So likewise, what are product underlying product SAP has a license, you have a license, those products will be installed on top of this network stack. So basically all SAP boxes are the same, and the kind of license you purchase, SAP provides you those add-ons, and once they are installed, it becomes your dedicated HR module, etc. Understood at the in bottom of the pyramid how it looks.
Mm.
Okay, and the software components breakup wise. See in this within Fiori you could have HR apps and you could have CRM apps, etc. Right? So those all are they call it as software components. So that is product. These are software components. So within Fiori you have lots of apps, correct? So how do you know which are like? So if you see here closely, so if I'll just go to this, if you see here, you'll find gateway, you'll find user interface. SAP underscore UI is the one which enables you all the UFA framework. All the framework is because of this SAP UI. When I said S4 HANA or ERP, when you log in, you have to check this particular parameter. If you do not have SAP underscore UI, that means you do not have any Fiori uh, software component installed. You cannot build or Fiori apps, or you cannot install any Fiori apps if you do not have SAP underscore UI. So this is the base product, which is software which is required to run your Fiori apps on this particular SAP server. And similarly, to build OData service, SCJW transaction is not accessible. That means you do not have the gateway foundation plugin. So SAP underscore GWFND is the component which is required for you to build OData services. So if you check this particular tech, so this gateway services is nothing but this is the add-on I'm talking about. So inside the front-end server, now this is a front-end server. Where is this front-end server? On this tab you saw, right? So this is how it looks. On this diagrammatically I represent, this is what it talks about. FES is nothing but this is the FES part, this whole box part, and then within that individual components are nothing but a software component. So gateway is the component. This is how it looks. So this is your gateway here. So this is your gateway foundation. So this is a software component, and this is the UI component which contains all this Fiori launchpad apps elements, etc. You're able to relate, right? So inside
Yes.
components are nothing but these are the software components. So unless if you basic check is uh, you log on to any system, whichever system you're having access, all you should be able to check is what is the database, what is the installed product, whether HR apps can be run or not. No, it cannot be run. There is no product in this which has any HR, etc. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So basically, without having any product, you cannot excel in. Sir. So customer asks, can I use any of these apps? You can come to here. You can just check it. Sir, Fiori apps are supported, but you do not have any license to access those apps. So we need to have a license. So we need to get in touch with basis to get those components installed. Then you can probably access the Fiori apps ruled
Mhm.
out. And if they ask for analytical apps, sir, we do not have any. So your current database is Sybase database, and for analytical apps, HANA database is a mandatory thing and you do not have it. So SAP insists to have an HANA database in order to access. I think either we need to plan for a migration to S4 HANA, etc. So this is how the jargons comes into picture, and this is how we answer to the customer scenario. Clear?
I mean, this may be a stupid question, but for the backend server, right, the BES,
Yes.
is it like assumed that the system that we just seeing this whole thing itself is the BES, and you won't see another line for a product for BES or anything here, right?
Correct. So this is also BS, I said. So you know that it is a BS, but correct, good question. So how do you know that this is a BS? So right. So if you see here, there are like other add-ons as well. So if you have here, BW is installed. Okay.
Mm.
So so here they are using BW as a product here, and on top of it itself, they are using all these applications. So we have that as well. So I'll show you one more system. So in this system, they're like not components are not. I mean, it doesn't have
Mm.
any components as such, so you'll not be able to figure it out. So ideally, you'll have this particular product versions, etc. Based on that, you'll come to know. So the so-called HR, etc., will be available on your backend system because that's where your data lies.
Yeah.
So I said CRM system, right? If you see the
Yeah.
diagram as well, and we're mentioning it as SAP backend system or S4 HANA system or business suite. So this system has only Fiori apps. So Fiori only using only Fiori product, you're limiting access to HR, etc. But on your backend system, you'll have your dedicated HR specific, etc. add-ons available. So that's the key difference between backend system and front-end system. So if you have a HR component installed, that means you have all your business data available as well.
Right. And then
Clear?
the connectivity happens via the OData services.
Correct, correct, correct. So I'll show you visually tomorrow because I think it will take in
Yeah.
detail we have to discuss both
Yeah.
systems. I'll show you back end system, front end. So now to have a overview, so this is how the architecture on paper looks and how it looks in real. Okay, so we
Right.
saw how it looks. Anyhow, you have already have